In this video, we're going to be doing the shader for the hair on the ninja. Now, he's got some pretty bushy eyebrows and some eyelashes, but if we take a look at layer number 5, there is also a tuft of hair that comes out from underneath his head wrap thing. And there's also a light that's hiding on layer number 5 that we don't actually want, so we can just delete that. And then let's switch to layer number 5 to isolate that hair tuft. Now, if you take a look, there's actually quite a few different planes over here that are emitting the hair. But if you look at the materials, most of them are using the same hair main material, but there is also a object hiding over here that is a hair rough material, and that's just a slightly more squiggly set of hair that's a slightly light color, just to give some variation to it, which is quite nice. So, if we take a look and use nodes, we've got a cool thing in Cycles, and that is the hair BSDF. Now, this shader is, you can sort of think of it as a summary of what hair will look like. We could theoretically remake this shader by using a diffuse and translucency shader with the anisotropy glossy shader, which is hiding over there. But the thing about hair is that because there's so many small little cylindrical objects, it's kind of a waste to try and shade them properly with like the regular shaders that we use on all the other objects, because they're so thin that they don't really make too much difference. So this hair shader is kind of a simplified version of what we would be able to make manually, and because of that, it's a lot quicker to render. So, if you take a look at this component drop down here, we've got reflection and transmission. And if you think about it, any kind of material in the world is either reflecting light or having light pass through the surface, which is transmission. And it's the same with hair, so we can use these two together. Now, it is a little bit strange that we have to pick one of these and not just adjust the values for both at the same time, because you'll pretty much always have reflection and transmission. It's just a bit strange, but we can do that. That's fine. So all we need to do is set one node to a transmission, and then duplicate the node and set the other one to reflection, and select them both and add them together like so with an add shader. And that is with the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. You can just select them and hit Control+. Okay, so basically, we just need to set these hair colors to a certain brown color, and I've got one over there in my clipboard. And then the reflection color I like to make slightly lighter color, so the reflection isn't so colored, but the transmission is nice when it's got some color in it, and you can feel the color bleeding through the layers of hair. It's sort of like, you can think of it like subsurface scattering, in that the light will pass through one hair, and then that light gets colored, and then it passes through the next hair and gets more colored, and it just feels better when you've got a nice hair color. But then we've got these strange things here with the offset and two roughness values. Now, the reason there's two of these, if we just drag this open a bit, is that the one is U and the one is V, and this is basically an anisotropic effect. If you take a look here, the anisotropic node has just one roughness node, but it also has an anisotropy value and a rotation. Now, the rotation here is pretty much the same as the offset over here. So we're just going to leave this offset though, because we don't actually want to rotate it. It's fine on 0. And now the U and V roughness. This is basically stretching the reflection and the transmission along a certain axis, and it works best when the roughness U, the first one, is slightly lower, or quite a lot lower than the second one actually. But when it comes to transmission, you don't often find an anisotropic transmission that often. So it's probably a good idea to keep these a little bit closer together. So I'm going to put this one on 0.3 and the second one on 0.6. But now when it comes to reflection, it's very important to have an anisotropic effect in your hair reflection. So to keep it quite sharp, we're going to put this on 0.04 and the other one on 0.625 or so. And these are just some values that I found worked quite well while testing it out on a model early on that had quite a lot more hair. And I've run it twice, once with only the reflection and once only with the transmission, and you can see what these two do alone, and when you add them together, it looks pretty nice. But the thing about hair is that it's not only about just the shader, it's also about the thickness and the shape of the hair, obviously. So if we go into the particle settings of one of our objects here, you can see that we've got right at the bottom some options for Cycles hair rendering. And the primitives are basically some line segments, which are literally just lines, and then actual triangles together, and then curve segments. Curve segments are the most accurate, but they also take the longest to render, so we're just going to use those anyway. You can take a look at the wiki to see the difference between these three options. And then we've also got the shape over here, which is an option between thick and ribbons. And thick is more accurate, it takes longer to render, but the ribbons is, I find they look a little bit strange because they're literally a single solid color, whereas the thick ones have a two-tone color, which gives them a little bit of thickness, as you would guess. And then we can leave all of these settings as default, and then luckily all of these shape and scaling and root thickness settings are pretty accurate. The average human hair is roughly 1/10 of a millimeter, and I'm not quite sure how Blender works out the scaling here, if we could actually input that size, but it looks to me that it's roughly the right size. And that is pretty much our hair shader done. Let's just go and copy these nodes onto our other material, so we can just, when you have the hair main material selected, we can say copy material, and then go find our object with the hair rough material, and say paste material. And that's going to copy it directly, and then we can just make this a little bit less transparent. Maybe we'll just copy paste that over there and then make this one even brighter. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And that is the hair shading done, so let's just copy this material again onto all the other hair materials. So let's just enable all those other layers, which is number 1, 2, 7, and 5. And then we can select our eyebrows over here. I think that's the one. The eyebrows, yep, they have a particle system, so that's the right one. We can just paste the material there, and the same thing for the eyelashes. And I think that should be correct. Render that, and it should look right. Or not. And, well, firstly, the reason the skin is black is because sub-surf scattering on the skin material isn't supported on GPU, and we're still using GPU rendering. But that'll fix itself automatically when we switch back to CPU. And then you can see the eyebrows are really quite thick, or the hairs themselves are quite thick. So let's go and change those down a bit to, well, let's just isolate some of these things so we can work on them together. There we go. So the eyebrows, let's make the size maybe 1/3, so 0.3, and that's pretty good. And the eyelashes, we might as well do the same thing. 0.3. And check that it's copying to the other side. It should be, yeah. Okay, and I think perhaps this hair is also a little bit too thick, so let's make that maybe 0.7. And double check that all of them are 0.7. They seem to be fine, except for the rough one. Okay. Now, the one thing you probably noticed is that the hair is quite shiny. Let's just go back into our rendered view. So if you want to dial back the shininess a little bit, we could still use the add shader, but all we need to do is darken the reflection color a little bit. And that should fix it all for us, I think. Okay, so let's just quickly go and do that to each of the materials. Make it darker. And that's the same, well, we've done that already. And the rough one. And finally, the last one. And I think that should work pretty well. Let's just switch to CPU rendering. It's kind of hard to tell what it looks like without the right color skin. And there we go, it looks pretty good. It's maybe a little bit too dull and grey and desaturated, but that's easy to just increase the color. The other thing you might want to do is adjust the color along the length of the hair. Now, I'm not going to do that now, but I'll show you how to do it anyway, and that is with the hair info node. And basically you have some options over here like is strand, and that helps you sort of make a material for the emitting object and for the hair in the same material. You could use this as a mask. And then you've got the intercept, which is the length of the hair, and the thickness. If you know your hair is getting thick at the top and thin at the bottom, then you could use the thickness control. Otherwise, just use the intercept, which is literally a black value near the root, and it slowly goes to white at the tip. So that's what you would use to control the color along the length with maybe a color ramp, like so. And then of course you could change these colors and slide them along like that. But anyway, we're not really going to do that because I think it looks pretty good as it is. And that is it for the hair material. So in the next video, we're finally going to start to use some node groups, which will basically let us copy materials from one object to another, while still allowing us to modify the node groups, which will modify all the other materials, but still also allowing us to use different textures on each object.